Now I'm going to go over the OSM proof of concept framework. Throughout the course of the project, we have defined a specific framework for developing proof of concepts and having them blessed by the OSM community as a fair and good representation of OSM in real life deployment and real life scenario environments. So we encourage members of the OSM community to design and deploy proof of concepts and contribute them back to the community that are relevant to contribute to further development of OSM, showcase OSM in real-world useful scenarios and use cases, and include multi-vendors and multi-components are preferred. And so the benefits of having an officially blessed POC is that it's endorsed by the OSM community and by the entire community as a representation of the project. It'll be centrally located on the OSM web portal and promoted. It's assigned an official POC number that will persist throughout the longevity of the project. And you will be considered for awards and recognition like the OSM Best New Feature Showcase Award. Industry event awards, so these POCs can be contributed to industry events globally to be nominated for various industry awards and technology awards as well. So in order for your POC to be recognized by OSM, you must follow the following not so rigid procedure. You must have at least one member that is an active OSM member or participant. And when we say member, we mean member company. So if you have a POC that comprises several different VNFs in a different scenario, only one of them really needs to be a member in order to get your POC recognized by OSM. It must use the core OSM components. In order to be an OSM POC, you must have OSM in it. And it must be presented for comment to the OSM community at large. And so we've included this in the process because we've discovered that by presenting your POC idea before you've fully executed it to the entire community, you generate a lot of feedback that might be relevant to your POC and improving it. You might generate a number of fans. You also might generate a number of companies that would like to participate in this POC and make it a little more fully featured and a little bit more exciting. And finally, it must be approved by the Technical Steering Committee. So the highlights of this process are, first, someone needs to join ETSI OSM. At least one member of your POC needs to be a member. You send a formal POC proposal to the OSM Tech mailing list. It's just an email. And the purpose of this is to inform the OSM community, gather the feedback, and finally the OSM's Technical Steering Committee will approve of your POC being blessed by the community, which is yet another email. So how to go about submitting this? Once it has been approved by the TSC, the next step is to send the relevant information to the OSM Marcom Committee. This is the Marketing and Communications Committee for publication on the OSM website. You will present the POC results and do a walkthrough in the OSM weekly tech meetings so that you can provide regular updates to the OSM community and gather feedback. And so one of the stipulations for these POCs is that we hope that you will keep it relevant in that as different versions of the VNF vendor software arise or different iterations of this POC arise as technology evolves or newer releases of OSM, we're hoping that you're going to repeat this POC and keep it relevant with current versions of software. And so part of that presentation of that POC is how do you plan to keep this relevant, or is it just a one-off? And is it properly resourced, or is there enough support within the community to continue to iterate this POC over time? All of these things are relevant when presenting the POC. It's not just about whether or not you got it working, but about how you're going to promote and support it going forward. Finally, you need to complete the POC with some videos and supporting documentation that we can post on the OSM website. And for more details about this process, you can visit the OSM wiki. There's a section there on the POC framework which we keep maintained about the process and any changes that happen to it. And so the proposal itself must contain the following elements, or rather the email that you send to the community must contain the following elements: a title, the team members and participating members, a short abstract of what it is you're trying to achieve and what you're demonstrating, what the real world use case is that you're showing in this POC, the key takeaways that you're expecting people to walk away from after they've reviewed your POC or watched the video, and the POC technical overview in the OSM PowerPoint template, which is this PowerPoint template, which is freely available on the OSM website. The OSM version and components leveraged by the POC. So when we say this, we specifically mean we want you to zero in on those components that are showcased, whether or not your POC focuses on the monitoring module and some of the plugins into that, or the POC focuses more on architectures that leverage the resource orchestrator or SDN plugins. We would like to see exactly which components of OSM are being highlighted in your POC. And also the dates and venues where you might be promoting this POC. If your company has a booth at an event that you might be showcasing this POC, we'd like to have our marketing committee capture that and promote it globally for you as well. So, in terms of marketing and communications, you need to communicate the following information: trademarks and permissions. So, did all of the participants in your POC actually consent to being members of it, and are they comfortable with us sharing their logos globally on our website and publications? Licensing of components. Are all of these components contributed under open source licenses, or are they authorized for use if they're commercial components? Press releases and public notifications. Will any of these be happening as part of the scope of your POC? Will your individual companies be promoting the POC outside of the scope of OSM to showcase your own software and capabilities? And any marketing programs that you're engaging in to promote this POC, like web, video, social media channels, and events. So here's an example of the most recent POC that was submitted. It was POC number 2, built by VMware, Rift.io, Fortinet, and DataArt, all of whom are current OSM members, I believe. As well as a number of additional software that we integrated, like FFmpeg, the Viata router, and the Ixia traffic simulator. Ixia, which is now known as Keysight. So the scope of this one was, we wanted to use Release 3 as an orchestrator to show that we can deploy multi-access edge computing scenarios using OSM as the orchestrator with VMware as the Vim. And the key use cases we focused on were video transcode at the edge, leveraging Fortinet as an S gateway in vRAN edge scenarios, and developing an SD-WAN network with Viata vRouter. We also wanted to showcase the operational intelligence capabilities in distributed architectures. So here's what we built. Across the top, you'll see we have the core data center. This represents the central data center in MEC architectures, and the architecture also includes 2 micro data centers. So these represent our edge data centers. In real-world deployments, this could be up to 5,000 different edge data centers, or it could be multi-tiered. But for the purposes of this POC, we have our centralized core data center as well as our 2 edge data centers. So you'll see here, OSM lives in what we call the management cluster. So this is where all of our control plane components live. That includes the VMware Integrated Openstack Vim control components, as well as the remainder of the vCloud NFV suite, which includes some FCAPs and monitoring components as well. So all of our control and management components live here in this management cluster in the core data center, but we also have a resource cluster here in this core data center too, what this resource cluster actually is another micro data center. So we can deploy customer-facing workloads here, here, or here. So the first use case that we deployed, well, the first thing that we did was we showcased how you can configure the infrastructure manager to have these multiple data centers contained within it. And we did that by leveraging OpenStack availability zones. So each of those different data centers, each of those different pods represents a different availability zone within OpenStack. The first use case we deployed were the SDWAN services. So we saw the demo earlier, leveraging the OSM dashboard. We were able to create our network service descriptor and then deploy it to push down not only deploying the VNFs themselves and getting them running, but then pushing down the configuration to the vIATA vRouter to configure the VPN tunnels between the edge data centers, as well as provision all the network components in NSX networking. That was the SDN layer that we used. The second use case that we looked at was deploying dynamic video transcoding at the edge. And so, oh, this is mislabeled. So what we did here was we packaged up a VNF and deployed it to one of the edge data centers to showcase that you can ingest, transcode, and push out video without backhauling it back to the central data center. This is especially relevant in some of the multi-access edge computing scenarios we're seeing in market today, where we want to eliminate the need to backhaul all of that video to transcode it. And so the content is ingested, transcoded, and sent out of the same data center that exists near the edge or closer to the users that are consuming it, as opposed to hairpinning all of that traffic back and forth after it's been transcoded. And finally, the fourth use case we wanted to showcase was how we could we had to use simulated vRAN because our lab wasn't big enough to actually have its own radio access network. So we used Ixia to simulate the vRAN traffic. But what we did was we used FortiGate as an S gateway to show that you can push that type of capability right down to the edge. In typical mobility scenarios, all of this traffic would be backhauled to a central data center. Everything that would need to happen beyond the S gateway, like the authentication, the IMS, et cetera, would happen at the central data center, and then all that traffic would then come back out to the edge, back to the user. What we've done is we've broken off parts of that network infrastructure and pushed it down to the edge. Now, doing the S gateway is just the most simplest use case, but what we want to demonstrate here is that you can actually decompose a mobile network and push some of the workloads to the edge as are appropriate and leave the centralized one central. And so that concludes our presentation on POCs. We do have a few minutes for questions if anyone has questions about the POC itself or about the framework or how to submit one. Show of hands, who's going to submit a POC? I'll take that to mean everyone. All right, thank you.